Hi and welcome back to the channel. Time to do my wrap up of my year's reading, and a year in which my reading was going really strong and then fell off a cliff towards the back end of the year. Being off the summer means you get to read a lot of books, and then when you go back to work you realise that your time is very much challenged, and the whole thing just fell apart. And if it wasn't for my group reads, I kind of would never have hit my target of around 50 books last year, which I did hit, but sort of struggled over the line compared to blasting through it, kind of sitting at 38 at the end of August, and then kind of just getting there at the end. But 50 books is still a magnificent achievement for me personally, and one that I never come anywhere near in any previous year of my life. So, like, here are my top 10 books. And just to show you how ridiculous my reading is, my top two books of the year last year, both had books that I could have read this year, and I didn't even get around to them. They were always sort of in the end of the long finger, as I would say, in terms of, I'll get that later on in the year once get over these other things, and some of them are a bit bulky to call it around. I just never got them. But here are the 10 best books that I read this year, and 10 very great books, and 10 that include series that I managed to finish off this year. And of course, a lot of book ones, because that's what we do as readers, isn't it? Number 10 is a book one, and it is John Scalzi's Old Man War. So, a book series that I started off, and started the second book as well, before Park and before I really hit my slump. But Old Man War, would it have hit as much if I hadn't reread Joe Haldeman's Forever War this year as part of our SF Masterworks read along? Probably not. Or if I hadn't read that before, probably not, because it definitely does riff on that idea of using time and eliminating time from the reason for people being involved in your war. Old Man's War tells us the story of a war being fought, a galactic war being fought, where it's fought by humans, certainly, but actually not in the way that you think. And to say much more would really dig too deep into what makes the book interesting. Like I say, it's not a very long book. It's fast propelled, it's quick, it sets up a series here, and John Scalzi has a way of propelling you page to page very, very quickly. I think I burnt through this in 2 to 3 days, says an awful lot about it. But essentially, if you were given the chance to have a second life, or have more of a life, or have a second chance at life at something at an elder age, would you take it? And it plays an awful lot of those philosophical themes of classic sci-fi, etc., and puts you in the position of asking yourself, well, what would I do? And does that sound appealing? All the while telling a very fantastical, rich world with links to other more menial things that people will recognise from stories. John Scalzi's Old Man's War was an incredibly enjoyable read. Second up is a very lauded book, and one that kind of is part of my venture into going into literary fiction, kind of stepping outside this fantasy sci-fi world that I had inhabited. And this is Toni Morrison's Beloved, a story that is set, kind of straddles the abolition of slavery. People that were slaves at one stage now become free people afterwards, and centers around the main story of our main character, who is trying to hold the household together, but sort of haunted by the horrors and the events of her past. Toni Morrison's writing is beyond beautiful. It has a lyrical style that is both very deep, rich. Some people might say it's a bit heavy in terms of writing prose, but again, not very long. And as we'll discuss through some of these other books, writing of that ilk means that when you get a payoff on a certain point of the book, all of the richness that was in the world, all of the storytelling that went in and the way that it was being told, totally pays off and gives you something really magnificent at the end. I fully intend to keep on reading some more Toni Morrison, because I love Beloved so much. Number 8 is just, at one point I had it much higher on the list, but it ended up down number 8 just by the sense of the books that I have. I've Westville Ascended here by J.C. and Bernard Joe Byrne. A book that a lot of people have talked about over the years as being sort of enjoyable, and something you'd like and get your teeth into. And what I found was something a bit more than that. I mean, it was something that again I raced through. I remember sitting, I had to start work at 9, and I got to the place quite early, and I'd thrown my book and bag, I'd thrown Wistful Ascending in, and I read for 20 minutes or so in the car, and time passed, and it ended up being late. sort of a couple minutes for late work because I got caught up in the story of Rohan, the guy who kind of pulls spaceships into bays in a space station called Westville. Uh, but this is above a kaiju planet that's beside a wormhole. That he has a past. It is a it is a story that has loads of layers and loads of things to draw you in, on top of just having great characters, and people that you really root for and like the whole way through it. Wistful Ascend was just so entertaining, funny in places, and it even has damn space bears. What's not to love? Can't wait to continue on with the series of the Hybrid Helix in 2024. Number 7 is a graphic novel series, a comic series, or otherwise. I'm going to go for Killer Be Killed now. I really thought this was going to be Gideon Falls at one stage, which I read this year and was fantastic for so long, and then dropped the ball very badly. It was an ending, whereas Killer Be Killed by Sean Phillips, Ed Brubaker, that amazing team, tells a story of, again, I think it's sort of this male fantasy thing of a guy coming to the end of his 20s, start of his 30s, kind of thinking, is this it? He's not in a steady relationship. It's kind of one of the most often told stories in movies, TV, etc. And he decides to become something greater, this wish fulfillment of to be powerful. And he gets that, and it's sort of a shades of Death Note on one side, and shades of that, midlife crisis, if you want, on the other. And it goes to enough good places, or enough interesting places, that I was very satisfied with how it went. You have a very interesting art style that goes with it. I think the graphic novel format of it really works very well. And it set me off down a path of reading more Brubaker and Phillips' work over the course of the year. And I thoroughly enjoyed both the read of this and the discussion of this over the period with Jose, Steve, and Jared, I think, joined us at the end. Killer Be Killed was just terrific. Number 6, again, quite lauded. Became a TV series. I've seen a bit of the TV series afterwards. Just doesn't have a patch in the book. I've heard that before. This is Emily St. John Mandel's Station 11. A book that is sort of eerily about the after effects of a pandemic, a flu-like pandemic that kind of wipes out most of civilization, and sort of straddles time between the present of when that pandemic was happening, and then cuts many years in the future with a travelling group of actors, a Shakespearean troupe who are going around from bit to bit. It definitely has like hallmarks of Last of Us, which was a TV series obviously that came out this year. I played the game beforehand. It definitely feels in that, but there's something about Emily St. John Mandel's books that I've read now a couple of subsequently from this that really kind of captured me, and kind of loved her writing and her world building, and again the characters that are in here. It's interesting how she ties all of her threads together in the books that I've read. There's sort of similarities there about how to do it without ever being sort of predictable, well, for me anyway. And I absolutely loved Station 11, and took me on a real ride, if that makes sense. Number 5 is, well, a book from a series that I might actually have fonder memories of the read-along than I do of actually the books, although that's not to say I didn't really enjoy the books. The books were the Expanse series, and my favourite read from this year from it was Tiamat's Wrath, which is book number 8 of the series, and it's the one that sets up the final events of the book in a lot of ways, but it also changes tack. Having read a lot of classic sci-fi this year, this was the most one that was classic sci-fi. It was very philosophical based. It kind of got into the themes of the bigger ideas that I was sort of yearning for a lot of the way through the book, in terms of, like, there's a lot of things going on here between factions and implications of what happens when we move off world, and some people are left behind and some people are trying to create something new, and everybody's trying to find a home, and it all kind of came wrapped up together for Tiamat's Wrath. And while these last 3 books were sort of very much hit and miss for a lot of it, I found Tiamat's Wrath just so much fun to read, and again propelled me through to the end of the series. And this is as much of a celebration of the Expanse as the series, and my memories of reading along with Steve, Leila, Susanna, and Robin in that period, and absolutely loved Tiamat's Wrath. 4 is another continuing series, and for me the best book of the entire series. If I say it's better than book 12, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's Skin Game by Jim Butcher, a book that sort of combines heists with with this ever-evolving world of Dresden and the Dresden Files, one of the things that makes Dresden so good in terms of a long-running series that an awful lot of other series are very afraid to do is that it constantly is not afraid to reinvent itself or change the rules of engagement for what you think the book is going to do or what the book is going to be. And for me, that's one of the things that makes the Dresden Files absolute blockbuster to read, because we get invested in characters, we get invested in people, we get invested in the world. We do care what happens to these people, but also there is a mythos and a world built up there that keeps on getting added to, and is constantly surprising. And even when you bring back characters that you sort of don't want to see, some people you can't wait to see more of, then you get something else. And for me, Skin Game was just this perfect mix of what could be a great standalone book heist thing to also kind of using all of that prior knowledge and all that prior world building that you've done to great effect. Loved Skin Game, and can't wait for more Dresden. Number 3 is, this book was terrific. I sort of feel bad it's not number 1. It's Drowned Kingdom by P.L. Stewart, a book that tells of the unlikable main character, Othrin, but also within that tells a story of the idea of Atlantis, not one that I know well, but it's written in such a way that it just drew me in. It has such interesting places and themes and ideas in it that even though there's a main character that you don't really like all the time, you do root for the nobleness of his cause or the person that he wants to be, and you kind of hope that his the person will match the ideals in a lot of ways. And I can't wait to read on in this series. And again, P.L. does one a year. If I can just read one every 11 months, I should catch up, and by the time it sort of comes back around 10 months or so, I should be doing okay. But The Drowned Kingdom was brilliant. Loved the journey that it took me on, and I loved the way that it was written as well. Which takes me on to book number 2, which, I could have picked any of the books that I read this year for this. I'm going to go for Warhost of Vastmark. Book 3 of The Wars of Light and Shadow. And for me, this was my favourite of the books, even though this is book 2.5 of the second half of the second cycle that's in it. To really say why it's my favourite maybe belies and gives too much spoiler away, but suffice to say that the whole series as a whole is obviously written in such a way that it builds and builds and builds and builds. And when you get a payoff, and this one was the end of the second cycle of books, so in book 2 and 3 kind of go together to tell a bit of a story, you get a payoff for everything that's been set up, for the pages and pages that have been set up before. And there's so much happens in these books, in The Wars of Light and Shadow, chapter to chapter. It's sort of, there's a reason we do 3 or 4 chapters at a time, because there's just, the consequences of what happened chapter to chapter are so enormous, and are so rich, and are so well thought out, and, characters doing things that are believable, that you've set up that they are that kind of person when they do something, or not that person, and you root for them, wish for them to be better, wish for better circumstances, the side characters, and how, especially, I think one of Jenny's real strengths is taking a character that you didn't know anything about or didn't care about, and then saying, within a chapter and a half, God, they're my favourite character now. It happens constantly all the way through it. I encourage anybody to read this series. It's been so rewarding. Not just to read it with other people, but to kind of make my way through. And a bit like I was talking about Beloved, there is a sense that elevated prose, why write like that? Well, it pays off in spades through it. There are scenes and pages within some of the chapters of this book, especially the stuff around music and how it's written, that if it wasn't written in elevated prose or in beautiful lyrical style, that would not be as effective. I wouldn't be caught in this swimming of just love of this entire story and book. So Warhost of Vastmark for me is my favourite of the series so far, and I'm very much looking forward to continuing again for the next year for the rest of the story, and the conclusions coming out next year as well. Whether we make it next year or finish the year afterwards, that'll do. And my number 1 book is, well, as soon as I finished reading it, I sort of knew this was going to be number 1. It's going to be very hard to beat, because it kind of instantly hit the top books I've ever read in my entire life. And As it turns out, I even read it twice this year. It's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I read it once by myself at the start of the year. I read it again as part of the read along, and there's just something about PK Dick's writing that just I find fascinating. How much of life and the things that happen are kind of dangled in front of people and kind of went, right, if we change this thing, or if the world went this way, this is what would happen. To then get to the point of like, right, going through to the end game of that. So the idea of the understanding of Electric Sheep is that we have humanity. It's kind of, I mean, I think it's fair to say it's dying out, but they're sort of threatened by the existence of androids, and especially androids that they can't tell the difference between, you know, what is an android, what isn't, and they go hunting them. And the character's forced with trying to hunt these people down in terms of getting a reward. And for his reward, because of the way humanity has went, it is to kind of have real animals. The whole thing's kind of bizarre as a concept, but that's also part of its strength, is that it plays in these ideas and going, this is completely believable because of all of this. And, you know, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, I could see it being a yearly read. It's so short that you could kind of keep on going your way through it, especially the first 4 or 5 chapters. I just think some of the ideas that they have in and around there about how, you know, religion will evolve, how we'll be controlling our emotions through drugs and outside technology, etc. It's all so relevant to the world that we're in today, and I absolutely loved Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and that's my #1 book of the year. If you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I hope to continue on with the journey, reading through for next year, with plenty of read-alongs and plenty of discussions about books that I'm really enjoying. And I'll probably do a video in the next couple of weeks, kind of illustrating what I think I should be doing in terms of reading books, especially now that period of, you know, struggling to get through books seems to have passed. I'm back in a more rich vein. All very exciting stuff. Hope you had a great year 2023. Thank you everybody for the support throughout the year. Anybody that's left a comment, anybody that's engaged, anybody that has had me on to talk about any of the books or has been discussing things, whether online, in person, or otherwise. It's been a real treat. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again soon. Take care. All the best. Bye.